There we go. Now I'm being recorded, like she said. You are not being recorded. Don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want. Well, within limits. That's the one I'm looking for. All right. Get that out of the way. Okay. Thank you for coming to today's presentation, Attack on the Caribsea. As I mentioned, we are live streaming. Thank you to a donation from H2O Captain Eco Tours. They kindly paid for our Zoom subscription for the year. So that allows us to talk for as long as we want, and everyone watching throughout the world can listen. So, and they will be able to see our slides too. So if for every reason you can't get in the car and drive down here like you did today, for those in the auditorium, you can always log on to the computer and watch us. I did also want to mention that we have our next presentation scheduled for next week, and our natural science curator, Keith Rittmaster, will be talking about dolphins, particularly those that are around Beaufort. So let's go ahead and get started here. What I have planned for you is to talk about just one very small fraction, one small part of World War II. One particular incident, and it is a attack by a German U-boat on the steam merchant vessel, the Caribsea. So I'm going to talk, I'll kind of give a brief background real quick on it, on kind of what led up to this event. And then I'm going to talk about how the two ships met each other here off of Cape Lookout in March of 1942. But as you know, today is December 7th. 81 years ago is when the Navy base at Pearl Harbor on Oahu, Hawaii was attacked by the Japanese. So that's kind of why I picked today for this program. It ties into that event. So let's go ahead and get started here. If I can get my right, I don't know, I can't find that. Maybe we're going to get started. There we go. Okay, you can see the slide. They can see the slide. I don't seem to have any objections online. That's good news. There's a lot of working parts here. So just a little brief timeline, kind of on the events leading up to the war. You can see through here, September 1, 1939, Germany invades Poland. September 3rd of that year, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Neville Chamberlain, announces the deadline for withdrawal of German troops from Poland has expired. So they set a deadline that said, you better get out of there, or we're going to get involved. They were probably already involved in some way, maybe not necessarily on the battlefield, but with sanctions and such. British ambassador to Berlin notifies the German government, unless they announce plans to withdraw from Poland, a state of war would exist between the two countries. That happens. France follows suit and is also at war with Germany. Later that same day, the British ocean liner Athenia is sunk by the German U-30. There were more than 1,100 passengers on board, 112 of whom lost their lives because of the attack. And of those 112, 28 were Americans, actually. So this took place across the Atlantic. December 7th, 1941, so already some time has passed there. After a year of U.S. trade embargoes placed on Japan for their hostile takeover of Indochina, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the Navy base on Oahu Island in Hawaii. December 8th, following day, President Franklin Roosevelt calls upon Congress for a declaration of war on the Empire of Japan. 1 hour after his speech, Congress approves the request. December 11th, 1941, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States as per the tripartite pact with Japan. Later that same day, U.S. Congress issues a declaration of war against Germany and Italy. Immediately after Germany declares war on the U.S., they implement Operation Polkenschlag under the direction of Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz. Polkenschlag was a plan to attack and take advantage of the vulnerable merchant ships in the sea lanes along the Atlantic coast by using the U-boats. U-boats had been used in World War I previously and actually had come along the North Carolina coast. And they had a hit on a light ship off of Diamond Shoals. But in World War II, the technology had improved, and they knew that they would definitely want to use those war machines along the waters and the coast of the United States. In this picture, we see two German U-boats. In the foreground is the U-123. Behind it is the U-201. This picture was taken in France, Lorient, around 1944. The Germans had occupied this part of France and were using it as a base. It was easier they were closer somewhat to the action for the Battle of the Atlantic anyway. And they used it for their U-boats. Now, the U-123 was the second U-boat to begin attacking merchant vessels off the coast of North Carolina. So that's one that's actually in the picture there. The first was the U-66. The U-66 attacked the steamship Alan Jackson January 18th, 1942, about 70 miles east of Nags Head. So at the time that this operation was implemented by the German Navy, there was only one vessel guarding the 5th Naval District, which encompassed the eastern shore of Virginia to Onslow Bay, North Carolina. You can see on the map on the right where that region is. So we see mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, the eastern shore of Virginia, and all the way down to Onslow Bay, which is south of Cape Lookout. So that one vessel was the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Dionne. This is not a picture of that cutter, but it's a very similar ship. I couldn't find a picture of that particular cutter. So that's a lot of water to protect just for that one boat. I was able to find some pictures on board the Coast Guard cutter. Here, the vessel is aiding a ship in distress. I don't know if you can see the ship in the background of the image. I don't know if that ship was attacked by a U-boat or if there was some other problem, but on the Coast Guard cutter, you actually can see the device or mechanism that launches the depth charges, and the depth charges look like a big 50-gallon drum or a barrel, and you can see them shaped like a V, and there's one directed to the port and starboard side of the vessel, and they would launch them out, I guess. Now, they might also be able to do a run of them off the stern. You can see some that are in a rack there, and they may just roll them right out, maybe several at a time. And those depth charges would sink and then explode and hopefully take care of the U-boat if there was one around. Here's the Coast Guard cutter Dionne making a depth charge run. So in this picture, you actually see an explosion that has happened underwater, and beyond the vessel, you see the water lift, the explosion and the white water and foam lifting up out of the ocean. They didn't always have a direct hit, but sometimes it didn't matter. it could be pretty close and still cause problems. So the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, felt that the U-boat losses inflicted along the Atlantic threatened the entire Allied war effort. We were sending supplies, materials, all kinds of things across the ocean. And in February 1942, he sent a fleet of converted British trawlers to our coast in order to engage in anti-submarine warfare. The U.S. also requested the use of British Navy ships to help, and they sent 24 anti-submarine corvettes. This picture is the HMS Dianthus. The crew is loading a depth charge into one of those, the equipment that it sends it overboard into the water. So, this aerial photograph is of a Allied convoy heading across the Atlantic. It was kind of an idea of safety in numbers, and it took a little while to catch on to use this. A single ship was an easy target. If you had lots of vessels at one time, might make it at least safer for some of them, because the U-boat couldn't attack all of them at once. Some of them could have been armed vessels. That would have helped too. They also had escort ships. They even had escort by air to keep an eye out. So by July of 1942, almost 400 ships were sunk or damaged, and nearly 5,000 people were lost in the American protected waters as a result of German U-boat attacks. That was a pretty short time period that this was happening. Here's an example of the tanker ship Dixie Arrow off of Cape Hatteras, March 26, 1942. And this is what the scene looked like after being attacked by a U-boat. We're familiar with calling the Outer Banks of North Carolina and that area of the coast the graveyard of the Atlantic, but it garnered another name during the war, Torpedo Junction. Some also refer to it as Torpedo Alley. And you had kind of a bottleneck situation where merchant ships coming from the south and headed north to the major port cities of Baltimore and Philadelphia and New York and such, with goods and a lot of times fuel actually from the Gulf of Mexico along those seaports there. And they had to come around Cape Hatteras and Cape Lookout. So U-boats realized that that was a prime target area where they could kind of lie in wait and ambush or hang out, surprise attack, if you will. Spend the day under the water for the most part, and then come up at nighttime in the cover of darkness and look for unsuspecting vessels. So a little bit about the Caribsea itself. Was actually built in Minnesota. It was a cargo freighter, oil-fired steamship, 261 feet. It was built in 1919. It had several names over the course of its life. The Lake Flattery, then it was renamed the Buenaventura, and eventually renamed the Caribsea. At the time, it was employed by the Stockard Steamship Company out of New York. The Caribsea was headed from Cuba to Baltimore, Maryland, by way of Norfolk. They were supposed to make a stop in Norfolk. The vessel was carrying a cargo of manganese ore, which is a common ingredient in steel production and an alloy component in aluminum. Unfortunately, it's also highly combustible. And the product was most likely mined in Brazil. So I don't know if the Caribsea picked up the manganese in Brazil or if it was taken to Cuba and it was picked up there by the Caribsea. But either way, that's what they had in the hold of the vessel. So some things that they were trying to prepare for, and the captain was, aware of where they were going and what could potentially happen. So the captain was Nicholas Manolis. He knew of the impending danger. They were referring to the area as Torpedo Alley or Torpedo Junction. So he decided to take some precautions in order to avoid or handle dangerous situations. The advice was given to all sea captains moving along the coast in these routes was to pick up an armed escort before going along the outer banks. I mean, they knew it was being targeted by German U-boats. Most merchant ships were at least traveling during daylight hours, where they were less likely to be attacked, and they were only making stops for overnight at safe harbors, Cape Lookout, Chesapeake Bay, Delaware Bay, but even those weren't really, completely fail-proof. So what the captain of the Caribsea had done was he told the radio operator to only be on duty at nighttime. We'll be lookout during the day. You get your rest. You got to stay up all night. And if something happens, that way you're ready. You're ready to radio it in and tell someone that we need help. And he wanted them to relay their expected coordinates of their position for every 2 hours as well, so that those that were listening on shore, Coast Guard, Navy, whoever would be aware that, where they're going. And he said to go ahead and send a SOS, if you will, and the minute anything happens. Don't wait for orders from the bridge. Just do it. You hear something big, feel something big, like an explosion, just right then and there, SOS. Don't wait for my orders. At each lifeboat station on the Caribsea, they placed an axe there. Instead of wasting time trying to lower the boats, just cut the line and let them fall as soon as something happens. As well, he said, make sure you put something shiny in the lifeboat. We don't know, how long we will be at sea, and we want any kind of means of signaling someone. So could be a mirror, could be something metal to reflect the sunlight and maybe catch somebody's attention from a distance. The other thing that the captain had told the crew to do was, especially the engine crew, was get ready to throw the boat in reverse, basically. If we're moving along and we get attacked, try and stop the boat as soon as you can and then start backing up. I guess his thought was it might kind of throw them off guard if they think that the ship is headed in one direction and the U-boat fires and expects the ship to keep heading in the same direction. Maybe the thought was to kind of throw them off. So let's talk a little bit about the attacker, the U-boat. The U-158 was a Type 9C U-boat. There were many different types and designs that were used. It was built for long-range patrols to make it all the way across the Atlantic and to go along the coastline there. I do not have a picture of the U-158, but I do have this picture of several Type 9C U-boats. In the foreground is the U-156, and back past that is the U-507. Now this picture was actually, I think, taken off the coast of Africa. And what's happening here, why are these people are on the deck of the U-boat, is they had just attacked the RMS Laconia, the British vessel Laconia, a troop transport vessel. So a lot of the men that you see here are actually British soldiers, I believe, and the German U-boat captain had realized that there was actually Italian prisoners of war on the Laconia. So Germany and Italy were allies, and on this Laconia were some some Allied friends to the Germans. So after they attacked, they found this out and said, "Oh, well, we want to help them and get them off the ship," but they ended up trying to get everybody off the boat. Some British ships were coming in at about the same time this happened. They called in a airstrike, I guess, if you will, and they started getting depth charged. And so they went below the surface, and I think that the German attempt at a rescue mission for those Italian POWs was over with, and then as well the British men that were on board the Laconia were now in trouble too. But that's a whole other story. I could do a whole separate program on that one, I'm sure, but today's focus is the Caribsea. So February 7th, 1942, the U-158 departs Germany. So they were not operating in France at that point. 24th of February at 8:55, they encounter an Allied convoy in the North Atlantic, and they make 2 hits on a British steam tanker, the Empire Celt. About 10:35 later that morning, they make 1 hit on another British vessel, the Dilemma. They damage it, but they do not sink that one. The first one they hit does sink. 6 of the 53 crew members are killed. The vessel breaks in 2 and goes under. The Dilemma, which was hit with 1 torpedo, was able to reduce speed and continue to Nova Scotia and make it there on March 1st, 1942. So on March 1st, the U-158 encounters the Norwegian motor tanker, the Finninger. They fire upon the vessel and return fire occurs. They don't fire a torpedo. The U-boats also had a deck gun. So there's at the surface, and they're firing the deck gun at the the Norwegian motor tanker. But the Finninger is armed, and they return fire. Unfortunately, though, the U-158 eventually sinks the tanker, and all 39 men that are on board abandon ship, but they're never found. The U-158 then proceeds to the coast of North Carolina. Makes it there the 10th of March, 1942. As instructed, the Caribsea reduces speed in order to not pass Diamond Shoals until daylight. The Caribsea is essentially a sitting duck at this point. They have no escort or weapons. The ship is completely blacked out. All the lights are turned off. That makes it a little bit harder to find at nighttime. The radio operator, a lookout on top of the bridge, and the second mate and the helmsman are all on duty. They're on watch. Everyone else has retired for the evening. So this is a chart of Cape Lookout there. The American flag depicts the general location of the Caribsea, and then the U-boat is right nearby. But there are other vessels in the area at the time. March 11th, after losing sight of another tanker it had been following, the U-158 spots the Caribsea, so they actually see it. And the U-boat is at the surface at this time at nighttime. They think it's a Coast Guard vessel for some reason or another. I don't know why they felt it was. But shortly before 2 a.m., the second mate on watch of the Caribsea, he reports unidentified tanker and another vessel type undetermined off the bow, probably the U-158. And I kind of created this little slide of to give you an idea of maybe what the scene looked like at night. I don't know what the weather was, if it was clear or not, and even the light on the horizon here was probably I over exaggerated, but just wanted to show you how U-boats could surface, and if there was any light coming from land, it could light up a tanker in between the U-boat and land. So during this time period along the coast, the whole eastern seaboard and elsewhere even, people were told no lights on at night. There were mandatory blackouts. If you lived by the coast, on the beaches or in the towns nearby, all the lights had to be turned out. The The vehicle lights had to be taped over or covered over, not used. And it was to help these merchant ships so they would not be backlit by light coming off the horizon. If you've ever been out at nighttime and seen a city from a distance, it puts off this glow, and it would aid the U-boats in their effort to find unsuspecting victims. So at 2:00 a.m., the Caribsea is hit with 2 torpedoes. The first torpedo hits the number 2 hold. The second hits about the middle of the ship. Went down fast, 3 minutes, sank in 3 minutes. There was no time to signal for help, no time to launch the lifeboats. The explosions were pretty large. As I mentioned, the manganese ore that was in the hull of the ship was combustible, which probably exacerbated the situation. Most of the crew find themselves in the water swimming and trying to find something to grab hold of. One of the life rafts is blown clear of the Caribsea. Fortunately, it is found floating upright, and 7 of the men are able to climb into the small boat. 21 of the crew did not survive. So as morning comes, the chance of being found it improves. It's not known what happens to the U-boat. They obviously had a hit. They take off and they get ready to hide for the day. Unfortunately for the men in the lifeboat, there were some missed opportunities. At 8:00 that morning, 3 tankers being escorted by a destroyer passed within 3 miles, but did not see the survivors. I don't know why they didn't link up with that escort themselves, maybe the night before, but either way, 8:30, a seaplane headed south flies by, and they do not see the survivors. They have a yellow flag in the lifeboat that they're waving, but nobody sees it. Another seaplane at 10:00 flying north and then east, they miss the lifeboat. Finally, at 12:30, the survivors are able to signal a passing vessel by reflecting the sun's rays, the midday sun, by using a lid of a can that was placed in the lifeboat. Remember, when I said they were trying to take measures to help in a situation like this, put something shiny and reflective in the lifeboat, and it ended up being a good idea, because the steam merchant, or American steam merchant Norlandia, was headed north to Baltimore at the time, and they catch this flash of light in the distance, and the captain changes course, and they pick up the survivors of the Caribsea. The 7 survivors are transferred from the Norlandia to a U.S. Coast Guard dispatch vessel off of Cape Henry, Virginia, and they're taken to Little Creek Coast Guard Station in Virginia Beach. There was one survivor, was a North Carolinian, Elton Hewitt. He's from Brunswick County. He lived to be 79 years old. He survived the attack. Elton and everyone else that was on board were awarded the Merchant Mariners Medal from Congress, as well as the Combat Bar with 1 star. The medal honors any merchant marine killed, wounded, or who suffered through dangerous exposure as a result of conflict against an opposing armed force. The Combat Bar on the bottom right was for seamen who served on a ship when it was attacked or damaged by an enemy. And the star there was for if they were forced to abandon ship. Now, unfortunately, there was another North Carolina native on board the Caribsea, James Baum Gaskell, born in Ocracoke, was on the Caribsea and did not survive. His cousin, Christopher Gaskell, reportedly happened to be walking the beach, or was on the beach within the days following the attack. Mind you that they did not hear about this. A lot of the people on the Outer Banks saw these things happening, heard the explosions, even saw the flames, saw the clouds of smoke, and in the days following such an attack may even find the bodies of the victims washed up on the beach. But they also found anything else from the ship washed up on the beach. And they say that James, or Jim Gaskell's cousin, Christopher, finds his U.S. Merchant Marine officer's license washed up on the beach, supposedly still in a frame. So I guess they had them on the Caribsea. The other interesting thing that happened was the ship's nameplate, the Caribsea, which is, you can see in the bottom of this picture. After the explosion, these pieces of the boat and things that are on it are floating around. Well, the nameplate apparently makes its way in through the inlet, Ocracoke Inlet, and washes up to the dock at the Pamlico Inn. And the Pamlico Inn is operated by Jim Gaskell's relatives, his family. And supposedly they're, I guess maybe it was his brother David was walking the dock in one of the mornings following the attack, and this board is, you know, kind of banging up against the dock in the water, and he kind of pushes it away. It was upside down at the time, and then the tide brings it back and is banging the dock, and he goes ahead and he goes to pull it up, and he lifts it up, and it's the nameplate from the ship that his cousin was on. And they eventually they get the news that Jim was killed in the explosion from the torpedoes in those early morning hours. A wooden spar from the Caribsea also washes up to the island, and Homer Howard uses it, and he makes a gold cross for display at the United Methodist Church on Ocracoke Island. This is a picture actually in the church, and you can see at the altar there the gold cross in the middle between the candles there. This is the crew list from the Caribsea. You can see men from all over, including Puerto Rico and Chile and British Guyana. But I highlighted the two North Carolinians. The names in red were those that were lost, and the names in black were the survivors. So I have Jim Gaskell, he was the third mate, and then Elton Hewitt, who did survive, was the third assistant engineer. And that's kind of why I picked this Caribsea story out of all of the attacks that were happening. You know, I picked this one because there were two men on it from North Carolina. They were, you know, what were the chances? Well, I mean, there were many people from North Carolina that coast that spent their life on the water as a commercial fisherman, as a merchant marine, as a sea captain, and to unfortunately be involved in this in your home waters right off of the coast. So between February 7th and June 30th of that year, the U-158 makes 19 hits, sinking all but two of those ships. The last attack by the U-158 was on June 29th of that year on a Latvian steamship, the Everelda. All 36 on board survive. Two are taken prisoner. I don't know why. The rest are set afloat in life rafts, and the ship was sunk by a boarding party that opened some valves on the vessel. The survivors that were set adrift in the life rafts were picked up by the U.S. Coast Guard, and some of them are taken to Ocracoke and some are taken to Morehead City. But the U-158 had made a mistake by sending some wireless signals during that incident. So in comes the Mariner flying boat. So that was on June 29th. Wireless signals from the U-158 are picked up by Allied forces, allowing them to pinpoint the location of the U-boat. June 30th, the next day, the PBM 3C Mariner flying boat out of Bermuda is directed to the location, and they drop two depth charges exploding directly under the stern of the U-boat. All 54 crew members and the two prisoners from the Everelda are lost in the incident. But that ends the reign of terror from the U-boat. So what about the actual vessel of the Caribsea? March 23rd, the mast of the vessel was mistaken for a periscope. They thought it was a U-boat, and it was depth charged. The wreck was marked with a flashing red buoy. So if I understand correctly, I guess it's like somewhat submerged. It's not completely on the bottom, maybe. So it's parts of it are considered a navigational hazard. In 1944, it was demolished to a depth in excess of 40 feet by the Navy Salvage Service. I don't know if there was air trapped in it or something to keep it from sinking all the way, but eventually it does end up in 90 feet of water, about 15 miles northeast of Cape Lookout. This is the underwater archaeologists' drawing of what the wreck site looks like at 90 feet of water. So just a pencil drawing of it. You can dive on this shipwreck site. The visibility is not always good. The currents can be pretty strong. But if you like sand tiger sharks, there's plenty of them out there. I've seen lots of good pictures during good visibility of the wreck site and the marine life that is attracted to the wreck site. This slide, the last slide here is from a exhibit that we had here in the auditorium. It was a temporary exhibit on World War II, and it focused on the Civil Air Patrol. There was a patrol base in Beaufort where civilians were taking to the skies to help in the effort to locate German U-boats. And we talked in depth about the Civil Air Patrol. There was a base in Beaufort and there was a base in Manio on Roanoke Island. But what you see in this picture, the main thing I wanted to point out was all those little red marks. Those were ships that were sunk by U-boats during World War II, over 70 vessels. So by late 1945, it's reported that over 800 men had lost their lives due to the U-boat attacks in the waters of the 5th Naval District, that district from the eastern shore of Virginia down to Onslow Bay. So the one story of the Caribsea is just a very small part of a bigger picture. I could do a presentation on each one of those little red triangles. That'd be a lot of work for me to do, but I think it'd be worth it to tell that story about World War II and Torpedo Junction. There is one other thing that I wanted to show you guys. It's a really short video clip. Hopefully I can get this to work. I'm not really the technical expert, and I'll see what I can do here though. I feel like I'm sharing my screen, but let's see. What do we want to do? Let's close that one maybe. I don't know. It kind of makes me nervous.
Ben, you need to slide the video over to the other screen.
Okay, we have a voice talking to me. I think I recognize that voice.
And you also have a question on Zoom asking where the nameplate is today.
It's at the question of where is the nameplate of the Caribsea today. It is at the Park Service Visitor Center on Ocracoke by the ferry terminal. That's actually how I got that picture of it. Slide. Okay, what are we doing here? This one. And grab that. So I can close that maybe. Okay, something's happening. That's a good sign. And I kind of want to make this bigger. Oh, there was something I was supposed to do that somebody told me. I don't think I did it. Sharing audio. Let's see, maybe it's in here. screen sharing. Share with sound. Yes, that's what I wanted. Okay. All right, there's that. Now I have to control things from over here. What I want to do is play this video that was put together by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They've been highly involved in researching and documenting and locating those shipwrecks that occurred during World War II. So they send divers down, or they send submersibles down, or they just get imagery, side scan sonars and stuff to learn about these shipwrecks. So, but this video has some footage from the time period and talks to some people involved. It's only a few minutes long, but
one of the really interesting things about this area is that when people think of where World War II came home to the United States, they think of Pearl Harbor and the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, but really the place that it came most consistently to the United States was along the Outer Banks and along the East Coast, and people aren't really aware of that.
We were just so isolated. It was very easy to keep this a secret here. And these people were told, don't talk about it, don't write about it, and they were good soldiers and they followed the rules.
When the United States entered the war, a lot of the sort of naval threat was perceived to be in the Pacific Ocean, so the bulk of the U.S. fleet was designated to operate in the Pacific, which left the East Coast largely unprotected. The U-boats had quite an advantage where they weren't really resisted initially until the United States had such a time that they could build up fleet forces for a two-ocean war.
One of the main reasons for targeting Cape Hatteras is because of the shipping lanes and the Gulf Stream primarily. If you have merchant vessels that are running, from south to north, they're trying their best to stay in the Gulf Stream because it's an underwater highway. It'll actually, give you a few knots of speed. Hatteras was far enough south and in the middle of two major Navy and military installations. I guess the Germans considered it was an area they could operate close to the coast and not be so close to a military installation.
It became a good spot for U-boats to hunt because of the way that the continental shelf comes so close to shore. The shipping lanes were still going over the shelf, but the U-boats could get out into deeper water to hide, which was their primary defense. So for these reasons, the U-boats kind of really preferred to hunt in this area.
During the war years, we could hear the explosions when, particularly tankers, when they were torpedoed, you could hear those explosions. And we'd go over to the beach, and one Sunday we went out, and actually at that particular Sunday there were 3 tankers burning at one time out there, all within sight of the beach. You could see in some cases the flames, others you could see just the black smoke rising.
My aunts told me about climbing up on the roof of the house that I inherited at night and watching the ships burn, see the glow of the ships. The people would hear them, the windows would rattle, they'd see the light, the fires, and they would actually begin to have, kind of like little prayer meetings and concerns and things. And even the people that were retired Coast Guardmen at the time, or the local people, would go to the beach, maybe patrol the beaches and look for survivors and things. Everybody helped.
Yeah, so that was a kind of give you a better imagery of the scene and what was happening, what was going on there. It was some good footage. That was all I have for you today for the Caribsea. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I hope that those watching online enjoyed it as well, and that you were able to see that video clip. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for coming today, and I hope you enjoy your visit to the museum. Don't forget, next week we have our natural science curator, Keith Rittmaster, will be talking about the dolphins around Beaufort and his ongoing study of photo tagging the dolphins. So thank you again and enjoy your afternoon.